So hello, I am Sean Lordan. I am the director of the PT's PT podcast and the owner of Concierge Physical Therapy in Central Mass. Today I've got my guest, Ryan Donahue, the Director of Reconditioning for the San Francisco 49ers. So Ryan and I went to school way back at Northeastern and graduated together. So really super happy and thrilled to have him take the time to join us today. So Ryan, without further ado, tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with the 49ers.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Sean. My role with the 49ers, essentially it's kind of like a director of rehab, but I feel like I'm part strength coach, part PT. So I really oversee everything from the second a player will get hurt until they get back onto the field. If you want to make it as concise as possible, that's exactly what I do.
I mean, that's pretty special. I feel like that's every young PT's dream who thinks about a sports path is to do, really like the combination of the strength piece
Right.
and the rehab piece, because they go together pretty hand in hand. So talk to us about, how you see the PT part, the rehab part, and the conditioning part, work together, why it's important that one person owns that process.
For sure. I think it's really important to have oversight over that because, if you think about a traditional medical model, especially in pro sports and college sports in general, you have the strength coaches, then you have the trainers or the medical staff, right? It became like a very siloed approach. And there wasn't really a transition of like somebody overseeing that from the medical side until the strength and conditioning side. I kind of recognized this at a younger age, and something we actually built very well at Northeastern when I was there. So while I was at Northeastern, if you remember, I was an assistant strength coach with the baseball team and the women's hoops team. And what Art Horn did really well there is he made sure that there was no gap. He put the strength coaches and the trainers essentially in the same room, just separated by glass. So everybody's together, and he brought that whole mindset of like, this is along a whole spectrum of what like PT acute treatment is at the lowest end of the spectrum, and then strength and conditioning is at the far end of the spectrum. So how do we make sure somebody owns that entire spectrum? And that's essentially where my role comes into play, overseeing all of that. That way, the medical staff can focus specifically on the acute injuries and subacute stuff, as well as help with some maintenance work. The strength coaches don't have to worry about any type of injuries that they have to oversee and modify different exercises for. They just focus on the healthy guys. Then I take over everything in the middle. And it just works out very smooth, what we have here.
Yeah, that's great. So tell me more about, who else is on the team there in terms of like, the rehab, I guess like the strength coaches, like talk to me about like the organization and what that looks like.
Yeah, for sure. We have a very unique department. So we run a high performance model compared to that traditional medical model that I was just speaking about. We have 15 people on staff. We have a high performance director that oversees everything: medical, reconditioning, my department, strength and conditioning, nutrition, and analytics. So we have one person that oversees everything. He serves as the bridge communication for the front office and the coaching staff. We have 4 strength coaches. We have 6 full-time on the medical staff, including 2. Well, in addition, we have 2 seasonal interns who are both, they both have their master's degree in athletic training. We have 2 recovery specialists, and we also have somebody on the analytics side to help us with anything that we want to look at from a data standpoint. So a pretty diverse staff and very integrated.
That's really cool. Talk to me more about the analytics piece and how that helps you do your job better.
That's a huge piece. And that's one thing that like I've really grown in a lot since my time here, because especially with everything I'm sure that you've heard, like data is becoming just like the hot thing to talk about. And like me personally, I've always believed that like data should be part of the conversation, but it shouldn't be on top. It helps guide decision making. And that's really what I do. Is like, we're fortunate here. We have a lot of cool toys to play around with, and also gives you a lot of numbers. So we have like the catapult for GPS data, where we can see the total yardage, the high speed yardage, how much they're accelerating, how much they're decelerating. But the biggest thing that I do, like I implement all that in the reconditioning process. And I always like to, I know it's kind of a weird term, but I like to weaponize that data. And I use that with everything. And that helps me provide better prescription, but you still have to execute it and know when it's appropriate. But the data collection that we have here, especially from the analytics side, really helps guide my decision making.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I'm like, I'm geeking out a little bit of, about that process. But give me an example, Ryan, of maybe a time you were able to weaponize those analytics to, obviously you don't have to use a player's name, but like to improve performance.
Yeah, for sure. We do that a lot, especially, soft tissue injuries are a big thing in pro sports. I mean, I'm sure even just watching on TV, you hear about player X pulled his hamstring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way that I built out all of our reconditioning protocols is we already know those baseline metrics. So we know that this player that you have, say you can run 20 miles an hour, and that's your top speed that I'll see you hit in a game. Well, that's something you need to get back to before you get back onto the field. You have to hit 90% of all your pre-injury markers for me to clear you to get back onto the field. So the way that I build everything out is just a regression off whatever their personal bests are, or whatever their expected ranges are. So for instance, the first day that somebody will be running after a hamstring injury, the goal is to hit 60% of their top speed. So I calculate all of that. And then we build that out, and that just goes into the entire calendar progression that I put together. And additionally, we use the numbers for, like I talked about earlier, like the total yards they'll have in a Wednesday practice and a game. It just helps you get closer to what the expected level of performance is. So one, that they're physically, mentally, and they're tactically prepared for what they need to do on the football field.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. Tell me about, your mentorship experiences, Ryan. And, you said, you worked at Northeastern, with Art Horn, and he was, what was his, I think, was he, yeah, give us a little bit more information on that, and, what your mentorship experiences have been like, as you've grown through your career.
Yeah, for sure. I've been very fortunate to have really good mentors, but also on the other side, I took advantage of every opportunity I had when talking with them. So Art has been a huge mentor for me, just from a standpoint of seeing a bigger picture and providing me with the environment to immediately contribute when I was at Northeastern. Even though I was still a PT student, I'd worked previously as a strength coach. So be working under his wing. I think he was Director of Sports Medicine at that time. Now he's with the Celtics. But he provided great leadership and mentorship for me, just kind of knowing how to see or to really more so to step back and see the bigger picture of everything. Because, at a young age that we were back at Northeastern, it's like you're really focused at the task at hand. It's like, how do we get this person better in the weight room? How do I improve range of motion? All this stuff. But he encouraged me to kind of step back and see, like, how do you improve everything and then have sustainable success after? He
Right.
was a great mentor for me at that time. But even before that, William Kramer at the University of Connecticut, where I did my undergrad, he's one of the pioneers in the strength and conditioning field, which really helped me see the end range of the whole spectrum, that helped me build out the regressions and progressions for everything that I currently do now.
Now, did you always see yourself in the role that you're currently in, or is that something that was sort of a dream for you?
Yeah, no, it's definitely something it's when I was a sophomore at UConn, I actually built a plan out to be in this role. So it was a 20-year plan. I ended up hitting it in 9 years, which was awesome, but
Wow.
definitely a little bit earlier than I anticipated.
Talk to us about that plan. What did that look like?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to build out. I knew where I wanted to be. So I knew I wanted to be kind of at a director level at the pro sports or collegiate level. And I just made up a checklist of like, Sean, if you had my resume in front of you, do I check all the boxes for you? So I wanted whoever looked at or heard my name first, they saw that I checked all the boxes, and then you just need to talk to me to see if I'm a fit for your team and your family. So I made up 5 different categories for that. So you obviously have to have content knowledge. So as a PT, you got to know PT stuff, right? And then you also, being in performance, you're going to need to know everything from a strength and conditioning side. So that was step 2. Then you got to have step 3, you got to have a big network of meaningful relationships, not just like, hey, we know each other. But it's like, if somebody calls you, Sean, about me, do you have enough to talk to me that I can actually like make a good judgment call on like what this person is like and if they do actually provide good value to my team. And then lastly, the biggest piece is like what I always view as the communication and the human behavior side of everything. Because it's, you need to know how many people have we went to school with that were way smarter than both of us, but don't know how to actually communicate that to the person that they're working with. The ability to adapt to human behavior was a big thing for me. So I needed to demonstrate that, especially in a diverse environment with all these athletes from different backgrounds. Same thing in the clinical world, but if you saw my resume and I checked off all those boxes, I knew that I'd be in a good spot. So I just built that out. And that's how I actually went about like everything for all my clinical rotations too. I was a big advocate and I had to do certain things at certain places so it would look better once I graduated, and it worked out. But
I mean, that's really tremendous advice, Ryan. So for anybody listening, if you heard those 5 pieces that, that Ryan really, you were really strategic about it, Ryan, right? So you thought like,
correct.
hey, this is where I want to be in 20 years when I'm, whatever, 42. And you did it, you said in 9 years, which is incredible. Like,
Right.
congratulations on that. I mean, that's really a feat to be reckoned with. And it's just a testament to your hard work. But the other piece is just knowing what you want, right? So you want to be, a director in pro sports, and then reverse engineering what that success looks like for you, but really across the board, right?
For
And
sure.
so that there's so much just meat on that bone, Ryan, that we could dive into. But tell me a little bit more, specifically about, we kind of all, as PTs, like, you kind of get your education. If you want to go into sports, you kind of, you, you really have to work with the clinical director, the clinical education team and the clinical experience team to make sure that you get those top rotations. So I'm sure, you got, which rotations did you end up doing from Northeastern out of our year?
Um, I actually worked at a fibromyalgia clinic, and that was because that was during the first rotation. If you remember, I think it was like in May and June, and I
Yeah.
was still, baseball season was still going on. So I had a responsibility first and foremost because I was employed by the university to be there for the baseball team. But I actually tell a lot of people that that was actually one of the that was probably the most impactful clinical rotation I had, because that forced me to think differently. And you think about somebody with fibromyalgia, right? It's like they always have a mental component of depression. They have some kind of digestive gut disturbance, and then they obviously have a physical ailment. That would made me think completely different from like how I'm communicating and how I'm adapting to people, because I'm coming from a high performance sport environment. Even at that time, working with baseball and what have you at Northeastern Sports, I had to completely change my approach with everything. And that really forced me to kind of step back at a different perspective and how I approach everything else, and really put more of a premium on the human behavior component. Um, Other clinicals I had, I think I had a subacute one in Las Vegas. That was just a requirement that we had to do. And then the last one
Yeah.
was a big one that I advocated for. That was with Athletes Performance. They're not, now they're called Exos, but that was a huge one because that checked off that I could really, at that time, they were the forefront of like we're performance physical therapy. So I really I had an exposure to them previously during the co-op rotation when I was with the Andrews Institute in Florida. So I
Mhm.
had some exposure to that, but just having more of like an actual clinical exposure being the last rotation for clinicals really set me up.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was joking with the team just a couple months ago. We got our first Andrews Institute referral, and I was like, we should put this on the wall somewhere. But from Florida, that's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, so that's not a a co-op to snuff at either, because that's, I mean, James Andrews is probably what, like the most recognizable orthopedic surgeon in pro sports,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
And I guess you probably should count that one as a clinical too. I mean, I didn't get paid for that one.
Mhm.
So I know that was the co-op experience, which is very rare. I think more universities should do that, but it gives you so much exposure to get comfortable and learn over a 6 month period. And that one was just, I saw the value in being there. Initially, they said no when I called because they couldn't pay and they didn't have a program. And I just said, hey, I'll come here. I had saved up enough money from working as a strength coach. And I was like, I saw the benefit of being there and
Yeah.
learning. And I went down there and I basically took it as a 6 month job interview. So I
Mhm.
did really well during my time there. This was even before we had all the spine classes. So I was very limited in what I knew and what I could apply. But by
Mhm.
the time that I finished that co-op experience, they told me that upon graduation, you have a job here if you want it. So
Yeah.
that, to me, that was worth it, because then I knew that was a platform where I'd get exposure to everybody in pro sports to leverage that opportunity into where I'm at now.
And so is that where you started your career?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was my
that's
first.
pretty
I
cool.
went there for, after we graduated, I went there for 3 years. Really networked my tail off, and that made some really meaningful and powerful connections, that when an opportunity like this came up to like truly change the way that people are thinking about health and performance, I checked all those boxes, and then it was just an easy thing when this job was open. So I moved right in, and that was 9 years ago.
Of those five pieces, that you really reverse engineered for your success, at like 20 years down the line, which one was the most difficult for you, personally and professionally?
I would say the psychology and human behavior aspect one, because it was
Mhm.
one thing that always came natural to me. Like, I'm always able to adapt and get along with people, but there wasn't really a lot of good literature or teaching around that. Like, how could I improve? Like, just what,
Mhm.
talking people, coaching people. There was nothing really outlined in that. But recently, there's been a lot of good stuff, and my good friend Brett Bartholomew has his company. It's called Art of Coaching. Highly recommended to anybody young in this field. He has a book called Conscious Coaching out there that really goes into uh, how the mind works, how human behavior works, like different archetypes that you'll see from personality traits, and then how to work with that. It's not like a malicious book by any chance, but it provides a blueprint to like how to deal with you, Sean, if you're having a tough day. If
Mhm.
you have like kind of like a different attitude, like you're going to be, you need to be like the king of the room wherever you go. It provides abilities how to, or provides different tools to how to work with that. So that was kind of the hardest thing to find, actual resources to develop. And I don't even know if there was actually more stuff in school, but like I forget what that, we only had one class that was on like the psychosocial aspect. And I took that class as a joke because I just didn't pay attention to it. I didn't find any value, but like looking back on it, I'm like, I don't even know if they actually had some stuff, but I probably could have got a lot more out of that, because it's like, I'm sure you've seen in your career, that's such a big piece. It's like nobody really cares about how much you really know. They want to know, well, one, are you competent? Two, do you care? And then three, can you help them? And if you address all three of those, really all that comes from the psychosocial aspect, right? So I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen a good amount of that in your career as well.
Yeah, Ryan, and I think you just bring around, the piece of, I love the two, the book recommendations, because those are always, huge for the audience and everybody looking to grow, their psychosocial skills. But our job is to meet people where they are, right? And I don't think, whether that's in an outpatient setting with your mom and dad or brother and sister, or in a professional setting where there's millions of dollars at stake, and contracts at stake, and game scores at stake. I think
Right.
everything is just dependent on the relationship that a patient or a client understands that you're there to help them get to where they need to be. But first, there's that trust piece, right? So it's like, hey, I'm
Agree.
not in it for me. I'm here for you, to help you on your journey to success, and whatever that success looks like for you. But you're exactly right. It starts with a conversation, and understanding that every personality type is going to be different, and you're dealing with people from all over the world, probably. And
Right.
in our microcosm in Central Mass, where my clinics are, it's you've got a certain socioeconomics set up. It's not, you don't see a ton of a ton of diversity. You do, of
For
course you
sure.
do, but it's not, I'm sure, like the diversity that you see in pro sports. But that's, I think
Right.
that's really powerful, Ryan, for new grads to hear, is that that's, I think you have to get good, and I think we both agree you have to get good with your clinical skill set, but that takes time, and it takes years to hone in on those skills. And you know board certifications are great, and the alphabet soup is great too, but also just seeing a bunch of different injuries helps as
Right.
well, and like seeing what happens, um and that just takes time. And that's sort of what I tell the new grads coming through our clinics, is like, hey, just don't beat yourself up if you don't get something right away, because I still miss things, and I've been doing this for a long time. And
For sure.
it's human nature. But I think the attitude that that we're talking about is, just get a little bit better every day, and then reverse engineer what that success looks like. And if that success is, um, I need to get better in my skill set of, in my social skill set, my, my psychosocial skill set, which you and I mean, it was the same way. I think we had such a hard semester that semester at school, and yeah, that class was like, the easy A, but looking back, you kind of just take for granted how,
Yeah,
how
sure.
valuable that could have been if you really invested the time to apply those principles.
Right. And then just
So tell
piggyback
me,
off what you just said about like
yeah,
how new grads get frustrated about not progressing when they get out. I mean, I think reframing the perspective is that when you graduate, you really are only taught how to not kill somebody, right?
mhm,
Like how much are you? I feel like graduate after you graduate from PT school, whatever your specialization wants to be, whether it be sports, neuro, whatever, it's like you're not prepared for that. You're
mhm.
prepared to just do general stuff. And so where you go after that, it sets you up for foundations, but by no means are you expected to be perfect in what you do. I mean, I failed a lot. I feel like we didn't even graduate. And I feel like I didn't have enough from an acute standpoint, like a post-surgical standpoint. And I
Mhm.
got so much of that with Andrews because he obviously with everybody going down there to have surgery, that was like the most immersive experience that I could have ever asked for, but I wasn't really prepared for that upon graduation. So to your point, expect a lot of opportunities to learn and grow.
Yeah, talk to us about that discomfort, Ryan, and what you felt at your first job, and um, talk to us more about that,
Yeah,
and what it
for
takes to
sure.
grow.
Yeah, it's just a lot of being comfortable with being uncomfortable and just knowing that there's a lot of good to come out of it. Like initially, obviously, when I'm at that clinic being my first job and you have, say, a pro athlete on your table, and then in the back of your mind you're like, okay, I only maybe did one or two of these post-op shoulders in my clinical rotations. So I just I literally just those three things that I shared with you earlier, that's what I just wanted to convey. And then the rest of it I just kind of went with presented. So how the case presented. But I just wanted to make sure that every day, one, I demonstrated that I cared about the person, two, that I was competent in the knowledge, just like I knew exactly what was going on with the surgery. So I always made sure I was up to date with everything. And then two, I always want to demonstrate that I could help them in some way. Every day I try to hit on those three things. And then more and more, I started getting more tools in my toolbox. But initially it was like, just focus on one of each of those things each day, and then you'll continue to get better.
Now, is that advice from a mentor, or is that something that's like a Ryan Donahue mantra?
I guess you could say it's my mantra, but it's just one thing that I've always just found. If you keep peeling back, like what has always been successful, and like those three things have always been a very successful thing to me. And then just thinking about it from myself on the other side, it's like, what do I value if I'm in the patient's perspective? I want to know, like, Sean, I want to know you. Do you know your stuff? Like, can you help me? And do you actually care? Or are you just trying to get this the next hour so you have until you have your next patient that comes in? You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a tremendous, three-piece mantra to live by, no
Yeah,
matter how far you've been out of school.
for sure.
Um,
And I think a lot of that at Andrews is what really forced me to really think about that. Because one, I already thought about that, but two, the way it was set up there, it's like I wouldn't always be one-on-one with like a pro athlete. There were times where I had a 8-time Pro Bowler on the table, and then the other patient I had at that time was a 76-year-old grandma who had a total knee. So I applied that to both of them because I realized it's like everybody wants to be treated like the pro athlete, right? So
yeah,
that 76-year-old grandma, I made sure that she knew that I knew what I was talking about. She knew I could help her, and she knew that I cared.
yeah. I mean, I think that's huge too. And just from a customer service or the customer service side, when I talk to our staff and other PTs that I meet anywhere, it's like the number one thing is everybody wants to be treated like a pro athlete, right? Where there's a reason why pro athletes, push certain PT clinics and certain products and things like that because, they're perceived to get the best of the best care, and I think that's really powerful that, you're able to kind of like conceptualize that, if you got a Medicare patient on the table next to that, pro athlete with 8 Pro Bowls to their name, that they're going to get the same, you know, not the same treatment, but that same attention to detail that
Correct.
and that's just I think a work ethic thing, which is tremendous. What's the best mentorship, or I guess what's the best advice, Ryan, that you've gotten so far in your career from a mentor?
I would probably say the best advice that I actually got is from the assistant strength coach at UConn when I was there. So this even dials back to is almost like 18 years ago. And this was like my first exposure into health and performance. He would just told me, he's like, at the end of the day, what really matters is it doesn't matter how many players you can train to go to the NFL draft, how many guys are so successful. At the end of the day, it really matters. Like, do your kids love you? Are your kids in jail? Are they happy? Are you happy with your wife? Is everything at home happy? Because, all this stuff is fleeting. All the like players will leave you, friends will leave you, other patients that you develop a good relationship, they'll all leave you. But at the one point, at the end of the day, there are probably like 3 or 4 people that never will. So never lose perspective of that. So that's one thing that I've definitely lost sight of at times, but that's where I always kind of come back to, is just to really keep everything in perspective, because we all want to work hard and outwork everybody and do the best that we can. I'm sure you were too, the same in school. You want to do everything possible to get high marks, to get the best job, to make the most money, but do that all with perspective, with the people at home. That's where your roots are, and that's where your central anchor should always be.
Yeah,
So I've
I
never
think that's
forgot that. That was probably the biggest piece of advice that I'm sure you probably forgot that at times too, but
yeah, and then so I mean, we could have a 2-hour follow-up to just that piece of just time
right.
management skills and all that other stuff. But I think so talk to us, because you've been so successful so soon, and you hit your mark at 9 years instead of 20. I guess my follow-up to that would be, how do you balance it all, and do you have any sort of tools or strategies, Ryan, that you use to manage your time so you can quote unquote do it all, or or at least try to.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I block time off for things. So I know that like if you're more apt to do stuff if you schedule it out, I've found. So it's like I've even gotten so far as like scheduling out like dates with my wife. That's what like could just then when you have that blocked off, you can look forward to it. Two, during that time that's what you're solely focused on. Same thing I do, like I'll block off like 30 minutes for emails, or I'll block off an hour for like I'm just gonna read for Con Ed. So making up a schedule and how that works best for you throughout the week. If you have it on paper, it gives you a sense of accountability to really manage that time as much as possible. And also, I mean, it's more about I've really shifted my mindset into being just more efficient with everything. So if like a task is done and I've done everything for the day, I don't need to be the last one here. My mindset now is like you're the fool if you're the first one in and you're the last one out. If you're just sitting there just to be present, you know what I
Right.
mean? You're not actually doing anything. So be efficient, and when you're done, when the task is done, move on to something else, or move on to something that matters more to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for any high performer, just like you, Ryan, you have to be intentional with the way you use your time, because time is, in my opinion, the most valuable resource that we have, because you don't get any more of it. Right.
For
So
sure.
everybody gets the same 24 hours in a day.
Right.
Um, and, but I just love the advice of, keeping those roots strong, and, the flower bed watered, because, without that, you're right, everything else kind of goes awry. And, I think, again, that's a totally separate, we could talk probably for 2 hours about,
Right.
how to go back and forth and the seesaw of work-life balance. And that's a big question we get from new grads is, hey, and what we like to see, what they like to see is more of a balance in the work and the life. And, sometimes there isn't a balance, and then that just needs to be planned for and communicated with your family when you're young. If your goal is to become the director of strength conditioning or reconditioning for the 49ers, that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time and effort. But as long as the end game of that is, that there's going to be time and there's scheduled time to be with your family, that's important. And that time that you're present too. It's not like, hey,
Right.
I'm still
Right.
thinking about something in the background. Because how many times I'm sure that you've been with, Bridget and the kids, and you're just like, hey, I have this going on in the background, and like, oh man, did I just miss this thing with this player or whatever? I could have progressed it. Like, you want to be fully present. And I think that's something that at least I personally struggle with, Ryan, is still staying 100% present in my interactions at home. I could be
Yeah.
better about that for sure.
Definitely not easy. By no means am I a role model for that, but I know what to do. I don't always do it, but
So what's next for Ryan Donahue?
That's a great question. I mean, I think definitely we're gonna ride this season out. Hopefully we can get it done, and then we'll see where it goes from here. I mean, obviously you want to continue progressing in your career. I mean, I've always wanted to be at the high performance director level, so a step above where I'm at now, or really leverage this experience into something else. I think one thing that we can do better as like educators is helping students and young grads plan for what the next step is. I didn't get a lot of that. Well, I mean, I did to a degree, but like you said, I hit my mark earlier than I wanted to, or I thought I would. But then what is the next step? And even I think you are a great example, because when you come out of school, everybody just wants to like be a great PT. But are you going to do that for the next like 40 years? Like, what are you going to do? I mean, I think you becoming a clinic owner and growing that, like that is a blueprint that like students and young grads need to know, because they didn't know what other options are. Because how many stories have you heard of people getting burnt out like in this profession? Because it's a lot physically, it's a lot mentally and spiritually, like taking the weight off of the people that you're trying to heal and help. So there has to be some kind of like exfil plan on what you're going to do, like whether that's leveraging it into like say like health tech or something like that, or building clinics like yourself. I mean, like what is the next step? That education is becoming a premium now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think I think it's normal too, Ryan, to not know what the next step is. I
For
think that
sure.
that's okay too. And I think sometimes you are where you are in life because you're supposed to be there. And I think that that's
Yeah, I
something
agree.
that I've struggled with, personally, is like, hey, I want to keep growing, and I can't for whatever reason, or I can't get that next position, or I haven't been able to get that super, whatever, a clinic director job in the past, and what for whatever reason. And when you look back in hindsight, it's like, well, I really grew and learned from that experience, and I am where I am today because I took advantage of the opportunities when they came, and I learned and I grew from those experiences. And I think that that's, you can't get down on yourself if you're a new grad and you don't get an opportunity to direct a clinic. Maybe you need to work on your communication skill set and your clinical skill set and, your interpersonal skill set before you're able to get there, or maybe that's not the right company for you, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that there are so many different things that, I wish I knew, Ryan, when I was, when I was 24 coming out of school that, I know now. But so I guess that'll probably be my last question because we're running out of time here. But if you were to give yourself, Ryan, any advice when you were 24, just graduating, what would it be and why?
It would probably be more so just really dive into like kind of the business aspect of everything. Kind of going along, we were talking about with the clinics, like how you have grown, is we're so focused on the technical aspect of becoming a good PT and just being more than just a new grad and advancing our careers as fast as possible. But they really don't focus a lot on like the tactical aspect. And like when I say tactical, I mean that's like all encompassing. That's like the human behavior aspect, that's the psychology stuff, that's the personal development and growing into something, leveraging each opportunity moving forward. So I wish that if I could tell myself a little bit earlier, I would say build out a longer plan. Not that I'm unhappy, but like it's just more like build out like this was my goal, and now it's like I'm just here. So now what else, And there's new
Yeah.
stuff every day, so it refreshes. But at some point, it's like what is the next? Like to your point, I don't really even have a good answer for you when you ask me like what is the next step. I mean,
And
you want to continue to grow and evolve, and you're not going to continue to grow and evolve if you're in the same spot. So more emphasis to kind of move on and evolve somewhere else.
yeah, but you have what it takes, Ryan, because it's the growth mindset. If you're growing every day and you're reading and you're, investing in, you know, in yourself and in your brain, right? Which is just like, it could be as simple as just keeping up with the latest research. And, yeah, that's
For
clinical,
sure.
but, you know, that's just getting, 1% better every day or every month or every year. And it just makes you ready for, when that next opportunity pops up, and who knows where it's going to be. But you're
Right.
exactly
Yeah.
right. Like expanding the network, those are all like really good. I hope, a lot of people are going to be able to listen to this because those are really good reverse engineered points that we talked about, earlier on in the podcast, because the networking piece is huge too. I'm a firm believer in that. We could, again, dive into that more too, but
Right.
we're on to kind of like the last rapid fire here. I'm going to ask you some personal questions and we'll go from
Yeah,
there. You
for
ready for
sure.
it?
You got it. Go
All right.
ahead.
Favorite concert?
Kenny Chesney at Gillette Stadium.
Nice, nice. I think he just rang the bell. He was the guy who rang the new
Oh,
Patriots
wow.
Patriots pulpit bell, the second home game. It was Tom Brady and then Kenny Chesney. So
Wow. Yeah,
he's
you
in
can't beat
he's in
Country Fest out there. So I don't know how
yeah,
many times I've been, but it's a fun spot.
it's crazy. Um, Best meal you've ever had?
Best meal I've ever had was probably at I'm blanking on the name of this. It's one of the bars that's right outside the TD Bank North Garden. But that was my first date with Bridget, and that was definitely the best meal ever because it provided a pathway to where I'm at now.
Love that. Yeah, that was my next question. So who did you share it with? So Bridget, that's tremendous. How many kids do you guys have?
Two. Two.
Nice.
How
And how
about
old
you?
are
You
they?
got any kids?
Yeah, two little girls, 4 and 2.
Nice. Yeah,
Noelle and
nice. Yeah.
Jolie. What
I
about you?
love it. Two boys, 5 and 3.
Yeah, so we're in the same boat.
More like
Just
animals than boys, but
yeah, two totally different. The boys
yeah.
are much different than the girls, that's for sure. Uh, yeah, it's crazy. What does it mean to you, Ryan, to be a great PT?
To be a great PT for me, I mean, I would say is to create change. You want to be an agent of change, both spiritually, mentally, and physiologically. That's
Nice.
just always my thing. It's like if I'm a good PT, I'm creating change. I'm a catalyst for change. That's always been my mindset.
I love that. And then your mantra for your life.
My mantra for life is just to serve. I got into this because I wanted to serve. You want to serve and you want to be an agent for change.
I mean, I love that. I love that. Well, thanks, Ryan, for joining us today. And I think there's a ton of pearls for anybody listening to take out of this. Is there anything you really want our listeners to come away from this with, Ryan, today?
Yeah, just more so just keep perspective on everything and then reverse engineer your entire journey, like actually plan it out. It's amazing what happens when you actually plan something out and then you execute it to the best of your ability. You go from being told you'll never be in pro sports to being a director of pro sports 3 years after graduating PT school.
I mean, that's incredible. Thanks again for joining us today, Ryan.
Yeah, for sure, my man. Happy to.